The Eagles are taking a big risk, as their controversial offseason strategy that saw them lose a lot of their big-name players has left the Super Bowl champions with clear uncertainty at a lot of positions ahead of next season. However, there is good reason to think that the Birds' bold plan could in fact pay off, so in this video, I'll break down exactly why that is, while also going in depth on some of the Eagles' most crucial players for next season. Plus, the Eagles also got some important draft updates with some exciting prospects meeting with Philly, so I'll talk about those too, and we're starting right now. We might be in a bit of a dead period during the NFL offseason right now, but things are about to heat up, as we are getting closer and closer to the 2025 NFL Draft, with perhaps the three most anticipated nights of the entire offseason set to kick off in about 3.5 weeks. And for the Eagles, this is going to be a crucial opportunity to shore up some holes on their roster, add high potential talent, and ultimately just improve their team in hopes of repeating as Super Bowl champs next season, and continuing to be in the running for years to come. And recently, we got some more big updates regarding the NFL Draft, as the Birds' next group of top 30 visits has been set, starting with Kansas State cornerback Jacob Parrish. And this is an interesting one for multiple reasons, one being that Parrish isn't the only corner the Eagles have brought in on a top 30 visit, more on that later, but it definitely does seem like corner is a position that the Birds could be targeting, even if they took two with their first couple selections last year. What makes Parrish a little different though is that he is very much on the smaller side, standing at just 5'10 and 191 pounds, so because of that, he's been projected as a guy that's primarily going to play in the slot at the NFL level, meaning that if the Eagles did draft him, it'd likely be so he could be the primary backup for Cooper DeJean. And honestly, with the departure of Avonte Maddox and no real depth at the slot cornerback position right now, that definitely makes a lot of sense, and despite some of his concerns like his smaller frame, occasional over-aggressiveness, and slight tendency to get caught looking in the backfield, Parrish also plays with a ton of heart and physicality, he's fast and athletic, he breaks on the football well, and he's typically very good in coverage, so as a late day 2 or 3 pick, I definitely think Parrish could make some sense. Moving on though, the next top 30 visit that was reported for the Eagles is kind of a big one, as they met with projected first or second round edge rusher out of Texas A&M, Nic Scourton, which one is yet another hint that the Eagles very well could take an edge rusher with their first pick at 32, or at the very least at some point in the draft, considering that Scourton marks the 4th edge rusher that they've brought in on a top 30 visit, with plenty of visits still yet to go. Plus, Scourton is just flat out an exciting prospect, as despite having a dip in production this past season due to being asked to play more on the inside, Scourton's talent and potential are still very clearly there, as this is a guy who already has a really deep bag of pass rushing moves with a lot of different moves in his bag, whether that's an incredible spin move that he's kind of become known for, or a nasty club, or a number of other things. Plus, he's also a very good power rusher at times, and has an extremely high motor and plays with relentless effort, which we know the Eagles value. So, that's all very positive. Obviously, there's also things that Scourton needs to improve on too, but again, the talent is there, and if the Eagles can get him for the right value, then I definitely think he makes a lot of sense to help at depth, and also as a potential future star at edge rusher. And I feel similarly about the next defensive lineman that the Eagles brought in on a top 30 visit, in interior defensive lineman TJ Sanders from South Carolina. As like Scourton, Sanders is a guy projected to go late in the first round or earlier in the second, and he would make a lot of sense as a potential fit for the Eagles, given that one, they could use another defensive tackle after losing Milton Williams, and also Sanders is just an exciting prospect in the sense that he's tough, he's quick, he's got a really fast first step, he's got a great bag of pass rushing moves, including a nice rip move, and he just plays with a level of physicality and violence that you love to see from your defensive lineman. So again, the potential is there for him to be a good player, and he could make sense for the Eagles late in the first round, or if they traded back. Getting to the Birds' next top 30 visit though, they also met with another cornerback, this time an Ole Miss's Trey Amos. So again, the Birds clearly are interested in bringing in a cornerback at some point in this draft, with Amos being the 3rd that they've brought in on a top 30 visit so far. And that's not to mention that Amos is one of the better corners in this entire draft class, as the SEC product is expected to go at some point in the 2nd round, or at least day 2 in general, and he's got a lot of traits that are pretty exciting, including some elite ball skills, an ability to break on the football extremely fast, and a physical play style at corner that's allowed him to be effective pressing guys to the line of scrimmage and also in tackling situations. Now, does he have some things to work on? 100% he does, but so does every single other draft prospect, and Amos is a guy that has the talent to potentially come in and compete with Kelee Ringo for the starting job, so as a day 2 pick, it would definitely make a lot of sense for the Birds. And again, top 30 visits are extremely important for the Eagles just based on their recent draft history, so safe to say these guys that they met with and the ones they'll meet with in the future all have very real shots of being drafted by the Birds when the big event rolls around in a few weeks. However, regardless of who they draft and at what position, the Eagles are still taking a pretty significant risk with their roster construction this season. And that's simply because after all these players have left in free agency or just in the offseason in general, and also going into a season where the Birds are trying to repeat as Super Bowl champions, they're going to be relying even more heavily on young, unproven players to step up and fill very important roles for them. And look, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it doesn't make sense, and actually, I think that it makes perfect sense because, like I've said all offseason long, the Eagles clearly have a plan, with their number one priority being paying a lot of their proven young guys to big contract extensions very soon, and they also already have a bunch of big contracts on the books, so they kind of have to rely on cheaper young players in a lot of areas because they can't really afford to do anything different. However, that's obviously still kind of a risk on paper because you just don't quite know what you're going to get from some of these young guys. So I figured in this video, I dive into all the Birds' young players that could potentially take on bigger roles next season and gauge just how likely I think they are to be successful next year. And we'll start with possibly the most polarizing of the bunch in safety Sydney Brown, because some people love him and others, well, not so much. Now, personally, I've always been a supporter of Sid because I just love a lot about the way that he plays the game, just with the energy he provides on defense and the aggression and physicality that he brings every time he's out on the field, whether it's defense or special teams. Plus, I mean, the talent's there. Like, the guy clearly has ability. We've seen flashes in coverage. He's got a couple picks, including a pick 6. And obviously, we've all seen the highlight reel hits too. So, I feel like he has the potential to be that tough, tone-setting, hard-hitting safety that the Birds lost in C.J. Gardner-Johnson. However, if he's going to do that, he has to slow down a little bit. I mean, the main issue with Sid so far is that he plays the game at 100 miles an hour all the time, and while that can be good in some instances, it can also get you beat in others, and we've seen that happen too. So for Sid to become a really good, reliable player, he has to become a bit more disciplined and know when to slow things down a bit. And I think Eagles Hall of Fame linebacker Seth Joyner actually put it perfectly just a few weeks ago when discussing Sid on his podcast.
Sydney Brown is 120 miles an hour all the time. And you can't play in the National Football League that way. You've got to figure out how to, know when to go 120 miles an hour and when to throttle it back to 60, and when to take it up to 70, and when to bring it back down to 50, and when to go back up to 90. That's just the way you have to play. Sydney is all out all the time. He's coming to make a tackle. He's either going to blow you up or he's going to miss it. He's got to learn how to get his angles. In a lot of ways, football is geometry.
Personally, I think Sid can figure it out, given that last year he was coming off the ACL tear and he missed all offseason training and the start of the season, but just given more time to be coached up by Vic Fangio, Christian Parker, and Joe Casper, and I think he can become the player the Birds need him to be should he be the starting safety by the end of training camp. Moving on to somebody else in the secondary, though, we switch our focus to Kelee Ringo, who is looking like the current clear favorite to start on the outside at corner opposite of Quinyon Mitchell. Now, obviously, things are subject to change depending on if the Eagles take a corner in the draft, and that goes for all these positions, but again, as of right now, Ringo looks to be the clear-cut favorite, and personally, I'm confident that he can excel in that role. I mean, sure, there are some concerns there, maybe about his limited agility and hip fluidity at times, and that can definitely show up in man coverage. The good news for Ringo, though, is that obviously Vic Fangio's scheme primarily utilizes zone coverage, which emphasizes Ringo's strengths and hides his weaknesses more. And the fact of the matter is that Ringo still has a lot of talent, being super fast, having good ball skills, and being just a bigger, more physical type of corner. And we also can't forget that when Ringo's played, he's been really good, whether that's in preseason, as he was an absolute menace in those games last year, and also, we have to remember that Ringo started 4 games at the end of his rookie season in 2023, and despite the Eagles' defense going through a collapse of epic proportions, Ringo was still really good, and his coverage stats showed that he was pretty locked down when he was out there, so personally, I'm confident in Ringo and think that he can be a good starter, but what do you guys think? But now, moving on, the next guy that'll likely be expected to play a much bigger role next year is offensive lineman Tyler Steen, who, after 2 seasons waiting, finally looks like he is going to be the starting right guard, barring what happens in the draft. And as I've said before, I think Steen can end up being really good in that role. I mean, sure, there are some analytical numbers out there suggesting that Steen was bad when he played this year, and Jason Kelce also did recently say that he thinks Steen needs to be a lot more consistent, but at the same time, the Eagles legend also said that he thinks Steen is a good player and he's confident in him being the starter this year. And personally, just watching him this past season, I mean, to me, Steen seemed to be pretty decent when he played. As in the 4 games he started, he definitely didn't stick out to me as a weakness on the offensive line, and the Birds' overall offense balled out in those 4 games, averaging 35 points and over 300 yards. So, is there things to clean up? For sure, but overall, if Tyler Steen is in fact the starting right guard when we get to training camp, then I'm not going to be too worried about it. And someone else who I'm not worried at all about taking on a bigger role is the soon-to-be second-year edge rusher Jalyx Hunt. And this is somebody who I talked about a couple videos ago, but if you didn't see that, basically in that video, I said that I was super excited about Hunt, given the fact that coming into his rookie season last year, I don't think any of us expected him to make any sort of impact, given that he was a 3rd-round pick out of a very small school, and he'd also just played safety a couple seasons prior, so he was labeled as a clear project coming out of college, yet he was still somehow able to make a big-time impact down the stretch of last season, and especially in the playoffs when he was given a bigger opportunity. So now, given even more time to get comfortable playing at the NFL level, get comfortable playing in Vic Fangio's defense, and also just get comfortable playing the edge rusher position in general, I feel like he's only going to get even better. So again, I am super excited about Jalyx Hunt getting a bigger role next season, and I honestly could see him making a massive leap. And I also kind of feel the same way about defensive tackle Moro Ojomo, as like Hunt, the 2023 7th-round pick came into last season with not a lot of expectations, yet he was able to make a significant impact on Philly's defense last year, both rushing the passer and against the run. And if you look at some of his more detailed pass rushing numbers specifically, they may surprise you, as Ojomo was 2nd among all defensive tackles in the entire NFL last season in pass rush win rate at 18.2%, which was just behind the best defensive tackle in football, Chris Jones, who was sitting at 18.8%. So, given a bigger role next season and more opportunities, I feel like it's realistic to expect that Ojomo's numbers could shoot through the roof and for him to possibly have a breakout season as well. Now, moving over to somebody who I'm probably a little bit less confident about though, someone else who's possibly going to be asked to play a much bigger role next season is linebacker Trotter Jr. As with Nakobe Dean likely out for the start of the season, Trotter Jr. is the next guy up on the Birds' current depth chart. Now, I want to emphasize that this is not a shot at Trot whatsoever, and I actually think he has the potential to be a good player. That said, I think the reason that I'm a little bit less confident in him than some of these other guys is just simply because we haven't really seen much of him yet. I mean, all these other guys have played a bit and shown potential, while Trotter really hasn't gotten much run at all besides on special teams. Now, that said, in the preseason, Trotter did have some nice moments, and he also did get to start in the regular season finale against the Giants when the Birds were resting their starters, and he actually played pretty well, putting up 11 tackles, while he also had half a sack the week prior against Dallas. So, in the very limited opportunities that Trot was given, he looked pretty good. So, all in all, I feel honestly pretty good about all the Eagles' young players that are going to have to step up, even mostly including Trotter, and maybe he could end up performing really well if he does have to start to begin next season, but we'll just have to wait and see. Similarly to how we'll have to wait and see when it comes to knowing who the Birds' starting tight end will be when next season rolls around, as of course with trade talks still swirling around Dallas Goedert, there's a lot of uncertainty at that tight end position right now, and the Eagles very well could enter the season with somebody different as their starter, whether that's one of the guys they have on their roster now, or somebody they draft in a few weeks, and obviously there's a very real chance that tight end is another position where the Birds end up relying on young and unproven talent, especially if they draft somebody. And in my last video, I actually did go over some of the Eagles' potential targets at that position in the draft, along with a bunch of other stuff, so if you want to check that out, I'll put that on the screen very soon. And also, while you're at it, make sure you guys subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss anything else, whether it's a video, whether it's a live stream. I'm going to be covering all the Eagles news this entire offseason, so again, subscribe, turn on notifications, and also drop a like to show some support because it really does help me out a ton. Let's see if we can get to at least 500 likes today, and also leave a comment down below regarding anything that I talked about in this video. Which young players are you most confident about? Which ones are you a little bit more skeptical about? Again, just give me all your thoughts down in the comments. And now, with all that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this one, guys. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.